Welcome back to Sera's Werewolf Romance collection, where the alphas are fiercely protective and the heroines absolutely refuse to bow. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. What are you doing while listening right now? Let me know in the comments and drop a parrot emoji or a paw print if you love a pet sidekick with serious attitude. Today we have a brilliant one. It's funny, it's packed with tension, and it involves a sassy kindergarten teacher, a massive alpha king, and a tiny wooden timeout stool. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to thrilling stories just like this one, hit that join button down below. It helps me keep the lights on and the audiobook romances coming. Now, take a deep breath. The teacher is officially on duty, and the king is in big trouble. Let's read. Chapter 1. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the Silverpine Cub Academy, casting warm squares of light across the floorboards. Nap time required a delicate balance of routine and strict rules. Harper stood at the front of her classroom, her hands resting on the cool wood of her desk. Next to her feet, her heavy canvas tote bag slumped against the desk leg, holding her personal items and a fresh change of clothes for emergencies. On the desk surface, her thick, hardback lesson planner sat open to Tuesday's schedule. She ran a finger down the rows of neat handwriting, checking off the morning activities. Peace ruled the room. 10 werewolf toddlers sprawled across the colorful reading rug in the center of the space. Some curled into tight balls, while others sprawled on their backs, their chests rising and falling in steady rhythms. Getting 10 high-energy pups to sleep at the same time felt like a victory worthy of a medal. Harper wore her hair pulled back, secured out of her face with a sturdy claw clip. A polished brass whistle hung from a woven lanyard around her neck, a tool she used to command attention during recess. From the corner of the room, a sharp chime broke the silence. Winston, her African gray parrot, shifted on his wooden perch. He ruffled his sleek gray feathers, showing off his bright crimson-red tail. He leaned forward and struck the small brass bell mounted to his cage with his beak. Harper reached into the deep pocket of her practical floral dress. Her fingers brushed against a handful of premium bird treats. She pulled one out and walked over to the perch. Winston snatched the treat with greedy precision. If that bird wakes up these kids, I will cancel his recess privileges for a month, Harper thought, offering him a stern look. Winston swallowed the treat and tilted his head. Quiet time, he mimicked, his voice a raspy echo of her own. Harper smiled and turned back to her desk. The piece shattered a second later. A loud, booming voice echoed from the hallway outside the classroom door. Heavy boots stomped against the linoleum. The sheer volume vibrated through the thin walls. On the reading rug, little Leo whimpered and sat up, rubbing his eyes. Mia, a pup who struggled with separation anxiety, let out a startled cry. Within seconds, the entire rug dissolved into chaos. 10 toddlers wailed, their fangs flashing as panic set in. The intruder's booming voice continued to rattle the doorframe. Harper's protective instincts flared into a bright, hot anger. She spent 3 hours getting the pup settled, and some inconsiderate brute ruined it in 10 seconds. She marched back to the reading rug, offering soothing shushes and gentle pats to calm the nearest children. The voice in the hall grew louder. It carried a heavy, oppressive energy that made the hair on Harper's arms stand up. It was an alpha aura, thick and demanding, meant to force submission. The pups whined louder, pressing their hands over their ears. Harper refused to let anyone terrorize her classroom. She reached for the polished brass whistle resting against her collarbone. She did not blow it. The noise would only scare the pups more. But holding the cool metal grounded her temper. She spun on her heel and marched toward the classroom door. She twisted the handle and pulled it open, stepping out into the hallway to confront the source of the disruption. Chapter 2. Lennox paced the narrow academy hallway, his combat boots thudding against the polished floor. Tension radiated from his broad, corded chest, stretching the dark fabric of his tailored shirt. He held an encrypted, sleek black cell phone to his ear, his grip tight enough to crack the casing. A group of rogue scouts had breached the eastern perimeter before dawn. The intrusion forced a complete shutdown of the pack's lumber mill. The delay caused a direct $90,000 deficit in their weekly exports, and Lennox wanted answers. "Find Finn," Lennox barked into the phone, his voice echoing off the rows of metal lockers. "Tell the beta to secure the western ridge. If those scouts cross the river, we lose the upper ground." He paused, listening to the static response from his head enforcer. Lennox squeezed the bridge of his nose. The stress of leadership felt like an endless marathon. He shoved his free hand into his pocket. His fingers brushed against a thick velvet pouch. Inside the pouch rested his heavy silver pocket watch, an heirloom kept shielded so the toxic metal would not burn his skin. Behind the pouch sat his leather wallet. He needed to coordinate a payoff for the damaged lumber equipment. But first, he needed a secure border. "I do not care about the rain," Lennox growled into the receiver. "Get Finn on the line right now." A door down the hall swung open. A woman stepped out, her posture rigid with irritation. She wore a floral dress with deep pockets and a sturdy claw clip in her hair. A brass whistle hung from her neck. She marched right up to him and crossed her arms. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp and polite. "You are disrupting nap time. Use your inside voice." Lennox blinked, lowering his encrypted phone. He stared at her from his towering height, his warm hazel eyes narrowing. He was the alpha of the Bloodmoon Pack. People did not scold him. When he walked into a room, conversation stopped. Subordinates bowed their heads. Acting on high-stress instinct, Lennox pushed a wave of his alpha command into his next words. "I am handling pack business. Go back inside." The command rolled through the air, a tangible force designed to make lower-ranking wolves drop to their knees. He expected her to avert her gaze and retreat. She did not flinch. She did not bow. If this overgrown lumberjack thinks a deep voice is enough to make me cower, he is dreaming, Harper thought, tapping her foot against the linoleum. Instead of submitting, the woman pointed a firm finger past him, gesturing toward the open classroom door. "Pack business happens at the estate. This is a school. You woke my students, and your energy is scaring them. You need a timeout." Lennox stood frozen. The enforcer on the other end of the phone call shouted a question, but Lennox ignored the noise. He stared at the defiant Omega. No one ever matched his gaze, let alone ordered him into a corner. A strange, unfamiliar spark ignited in his chest. From inside the classroom, a parrot flapped its wings and squawks rang out. "Your face looks like a dropped pie! Back up!" Lennox felt the tension drain from his thick shoulders. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit him like a bucket of ice water. He hung up the phone. Chapter 3. Lennox slipped the phone into his pocket, his thumb brushing the leather wallet as he secured the device. He stared down at the fearless woman blocking his path. As the aggressive haze of his alpha command faded from the air, a new sensation hit him. A scent drifted up from her skin, washing over his heightened senses. It was a crisp, refreshing blend of sun-warmed peaches and fresh linen. It bypassed his logical brain and struck his inner wolf with the force of a falling tree. The wild, primal part of his mind quieted instantly, captivated by the soothing aroma. Why does the only person who refuses to bow smell like the exact thing I have searched for my entire life? Lennox thought, his heart hammering against his ribs. His pride warred with a sudden, intense attraction. He spent his days surrounded by yes-men, fierce warriors, and people terrified of his temper. This woman viewed him as a misbehaving toddler. A slow, boyish grin broke across his sharp jawline. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he rarely displayed in public. "A timeout," Lennox repeated, his voice dropping the commanding edge. "Yes," Harper said, holding her ground. Her bright, observant eyes locked onto his hazel ones. "The colorful reading rug has a stool in the corner. You can sit there until you remember how to whisper." Lennox chuckled. The sound rumbled deep in his chest. He took a step forward. Harper braced herself, expecting him to push past her. Instead, Lennox leaned down, wrapped a thick arm behind her knees, and scooped her up over his shoulder. Harper gasped, her hands flying out to catch her balance. Her fingers gripped the solid muscle of his back. "Put me down this instant!" "You said I need a timeout," Lennox said, turning toward the classroom door. He carried her through the threshold with zero effort. The 10 crying toddlers on the rug stopped their whining. They sat up, their tear-streaked faces staring in awe as the giant Alpha King carried their teacher across the room. Winston the parrot rang his brass bell in a frantic rhythm. Lennox marched past the children and headed straight for the designated corner. A small wooden stool sat against the wall. He stopped in front of it and bent his knees, setting Harper down on her feet with surprising gentleness. She stepped back, her hands smoothing the front of her dress. Her cheeks burned bright red. Lennox looked at the tiny wooden stool, then looked down at Harper. He offered her a wicked, charming smile. He leaned in close, letting the scent of peaches and fresh linen wrap around him again. "Looks like we are both in trouble," he whispered. Harper stared at him, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a reprimand. The brass whistle on her lanyard clinked against her collarbone. Before she could form a sentence, loud footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Chapter 4. Harper stood in the corner of her own classroom, her pulse racing like a runaway train. She adjusted the sturdy claw clip in her hair, trying to regain her professional composure. The towering Alpha King stood mere inches away, his broad shoulders blocking the sunlight from the window. He showed no intention of leaving. "You cannot stay here," Harper whispered, pointing toward the door. "You have a perimeter breach to handle." Before Lennox could answer, a frantic voice called out from the hallway. "Lennox, are you in here?" Lennox recognized the voice immediately. It was his beta, Finn. The beta's boots pounded against the floorboards, searching the corridor. Lennox let out a low groan of annoyance. He wanted peace, not another debriefing about the lumber mill. Acting on pure impulse, Lennox grabbed the tiny wooden stool. He sat down, his knees coming up near his chest due to the furniture's miniature size. He pressed his back against the wall, hiding behind a tall bookshelf that shielded the timeout corner from the doorway. He looked up at Harper and pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to keep quiet. Harper crossed her arms, appalled by the display. The most powerful man in the territory is currently hiding from his responsibilities on a piece of toddler furniture, she thought, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. Finn poked his head through the open classroom doorway. He scanned the room, his eyes sweeping over the 10 staring pups and the gray parrot. Finn missed the corner entirely. "Excuse me, miss. Did an angry wall of muscle walk past here?" Winston flapped his wings. "Dropped pie! Back up!" The bird squawked, ringing his brass bell. Finn frowned, taking a step back into the hall. Right. Sorry to interrupt. The beta turned and jogged down the corridor, his footsteps fading away. Harper exhaled, releasing a breath she did not realize she held. She turned her attention back to the corner. Lennox remained on the stool, his long legs stretched out in front of him. He rested his head against the painted wall, closing his eyes. The deep lines of stress around his mouth began to soften. The chaotic noise of his alpha duties vanished, replaced by the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the pups and the calming presence of the Omega standing beside him. "You need to leave," Harper said, though her voice lacked its previous bite. Lennox opened his hazel eyes and looked up at her. He felt a profound, grounding peace he had not experienced in decades. He had no intention of walking back out into the storm just yet. "I cannot leave," Lennox said, a playful smirk returning to his face. "I am in a timeout. Rules are rules, teacher." Harper stared at him, her heart doing a strange, fluttering flip. She walked over to her desk, grabbed her thick hardback lesson planner, and began organizing her afternoon tasks. She tried to ignore the towering king sitting in her corner, but the charged energy in the room made it impossible to forget he was there. Chapter 5. The nap period ended. Harper closed her thick hardback lesson planner. She stood from her desk and walked to the colorful reading rug. 10 werewolf toddlers stirred on the floorboards. Little Leo rubbed his eyes, stretching his arms toward the ceiling. Mia clutched a woven blanket. Harper knelt on the floor, smoothing the fabric of her floral dress. She needed to start the afternoon spelling lesson. She guided the sleepy pups into a neat circle. The children crossed their legs and focused their bright eyes on her. Harper pulled a stack of picture cards from the pocket of her dress. Behind the 7-foot wooden bookshelf in the corner, Lennox remained on the miniature stool. The tall piece of furniture shielded his towering frame from the doorway, but he retained a clear view of the reading rug. He stretched his long legs out, crossing his combat boots at the ankles. His encrypted black cell phone stayed silent in his pocket. He watched Harper hold up a picture card of a red apple. Her voice carried a melodic, patient rhythm. She praised Leo for sounding out the first letter. She offered Mia a warm, encouraging smile when the shy pup stumbled over a vowel. Lennox studied the soft curve of Harper's cheek and the sturdy claw clip holding her hair in place. The frantic stress of the Bloodmoon territory vanished from his mind. No one asked him for orders. No one demanded his blood. He sat in a quiet room and found peace. "I command a fierce army. Yet a woman teaching the alphabet holds my attention better than a war council." Harper flipped to the next card. Before she could ask the class to identify the shape, a sharp chime broke the rhythm. Winston, the African gray parrot, hopped along his wooden perch. He ruffled his sleek gray feathers and struck his brass bell with his beak. The bird fixed a dark, unblinking eye on the corner bookshelf. He spotted the Alpha King hiding in the shadows. Winston flapped his wings, showing off his crimson-red tail. "Big dummy," Winston squawked, his raspy voice echoing in the quiet room. "Dropped pie! Sit down, ugly!" The 10 toddlers gasped. They covered their mouths, giggling behind their hands. Harper shot a stern glare at the birdcage. She reached for the premium bird treats in her pocket, intending to bribe the parrot into silence. A low, rumbling sound came from the corner. Lennox placed a large hand on the edge of the bookshelf and pushed himself up from the tiny stool. His broad, corded chest cleared the top of the 7-foot shelf. He stepped out of the shadows, walking into the sunlight. The warm hazel of his eyes shone with pure amusement. Lennox threw his head back and laughed. The sound filled the room, rich and genuine. It was not the commanding roar of an alpha. but the joyful sound of a man finding absolute delight in the chaos. Winston rang his bell again in response. Harper pressed her lips together, trying to hide a smile. The towering man looked ridiculous standing next to the toddler furniture, yet his presence commanded the space. Lennox walked over to the birdcage. He did not touch the bars, respecting the boundary, but he offered Winston a respectful nod. "I like him," Lennox said, turning his gaze to Harper. "He tells the truth without flinching. You run an impressive pack here, teacher." Harper tapped her foot, her fingers gripping the picture cards. "We prefer manners in this classroom, both from the pets and the uninvited guests." Lennox stepped closer to the reading rug. He crouched down to eye level with the children. Little Leo leaned forward, eyes wide. "Are you a giant?" Lennox chuckled. "Sometimes, but right now, I am just a student in the timeout corner." Mia tilted her head. "Did you yell?" "I did," Lennox confessed, keeping his voice a low, steady rumble. "Your teacher reminded me to use my inside voice. She is very brave." Harper grabbed her brass whistle, running her thumb over the cool metal to ground her racing pulse. She expected arrogance from the king. Instead, he displayed humility in front of her students. He accepted his scolding with grace. Lennox stood up, his combat boots planted firm on the linoleum. "I will wait by your desk. I owe you an apology, and I intend to deliver it properly." He walked toward the front of the room, taking a seat on the floor next to her heavy canvas tote bag. Harper swallowed hard. Focusing on the spelling cards felt like a monumental task, with his gaze tracking her every move. Chapter 6. The spelling lesson concluded. Harper instructed the 10 pups to retrieve their snack boxes from the cubbies lining the back wall. The children scattered, their energetic chatter filling the room. Harper walked back to her desk and placed her picture cards next to her thick, hardback lesson planner. Lennox sat on the floorboards beside her desk, leaning his broad back against the wall. He watched the children with quiet interest. His encrypted cell phone remained hidden in his pocket. He made no move to return to his pack duties. The classroom door swung open. Maya stepped over the threshold, holding 2 brown paper bags. Maya shared Harper's soft features, but carried the pragmatic, grounded energy of a Delta. She worked as an event planner and managed Harper's chaotic schedule with ruthless efficiency. "Lunch delivery," Maya announced, lifting the paper bags. "I brought the turkey sandwiches from the deli down the street." Maya stopped walking. Her eyes widened as she spotted the towering Alpha King sitting on the floor next to Harper's canvas tote bag. Maya shifted her gaze from Lennox to Harper, raising her eyebrows in a silent question. Harper grabbed the paper bags from her sister's hands. She set them on the desk, avoiding Maya's stare. "Thank you for the food. You can go back to work now." Maya did not move. She crossed her arms, a knowing smirk forming on her lips. She leaned closer to Harper, keeping her voice low so the children could not hear. "Why is the leader of the Bloodmoon Pack sitting in your classroom like a grounded teenager?" "He disrupted nap time," Harper whispered back, her fingers tapping against the edge of the wooden desk. "I gave him a timeout." Maya let out a short laugh. She clamped a hand over her mouth. "You put the Alpha King in a corner? Harper, you are out of your mind." "He was loud. My students were sleeping." "The rules apply to everyone." Maya glanced past Harper's shoulder. Lennox watched them, his warm hazel eyes tracking their quiet exchange. He offered Maya a polite, respectful nod. Maya turned back to her sister, her smirk growing wider. "He is staring at you," Maya pointed out. "Not just looking. He is obsessed. I give it 2 days before he starts bringing you gifts." Harper felt a traitorous flutter in her chest. She grabbed her brass whistle, gripping the metal tight. She remembered the betrayal of her former alpha. The corrupt leader embezzled her family's land, causing a devastating $200,000 financial ruin. The disaster stripped them of their savings and their home. Leaders took what they wanted and discarded the rest. I cannot afford to trust another powerful man, no matter how charming his smile looks. You are being ridiculous, Harper told her sister, her voice firm. He is just avoiding his beta. He will leave as soon as the children go outside for recess. There is no obsession. Maya grabbed a turkey sandwich from one of the bags. She took a deliberate bite, chewing slow as she maintained eye contact with Harper. Sure, the man who commands hundreds of lethal warriors is hiding in a kindergarten room for his health. Keep telling yourself that. Winston the parrot chimed in from his cage, ringing his brass bell. Big dummy, he squawked. Maya pointed at the bird. See, even Winston agrees with me. Harper groaned, rubbing her temples. She walked around the desk, determined to ignore her sister's teasing. She approached Lennox, extending a hand to offer him the second paper bag. My sister brought extra, Harper said, her tone professional. You must be hungry. Lennox accepted the bag, his large fingers brushing against hers. A jolt of heat shot up Harper's arm at the brief contact. She snatched her hand back, her pulse racing a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Lennox noticed her reaction. A subtle, satisfied smile touched his sharp jawline. Thank you, teacher, Lennox rumbled. I appreciate the care. Maya waved from the doorway, her mission accomplished. Have fun with your new student, Harper. She stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind her. Chapter 7. The afternoon slipped away. The 10 toddlers finished their snacks and transitioned to quiet reading time. Lennox finished his turkey sandwich and crumpled the paper bag, tossing it into the waste bin with perfect aim. He stood up, his combat boots silent on the floorboards. He walked over to Harper's desk. Harper sat in her chair, writing notes in her thick, hardback lesson planner. Her shimmering cherry blossom pink sedan sat in the parking lot outside, waiting to take her home. The school day neared its end. Lennox knew his window of quiet time was closing. His beta, Finn, would track him down soon. Lennox rested his large hands on the edge of the wooden desk. He needed to make his intentions clear. He spent years building the Bloodmoon Pack, focusing solely on securing borders and expanding trade. He ignored his personal life. Now, standing in front of this brave Omega, the loneliness of his position felt sharp and heavy. Harper, Lennox began, his voice a low, steady rumble. She looked up from her planner. Her bright, observant eyes met his hazel ones. Yes? I want some of your time, Lennox stated, refusing to dance around the subject. Outside of this classroom, I want to court you properly. Harper stopped writing. She set her pen down. She studied his face, searching for a hidden motive. You run an entire territory. You do not have time to sit in a school, let alone court a teacher. I make my own schedule, Lennox countered. He wanted to show her his worth. He wanted to provide. I will secure a private $5,000 reservation at the Summit restaurant. We will have the entire rooftop to ourselves. My enforcers will drive us in the armored SUV. You will not have to worry about a single detail. Harper's expression hardened. The soft curve of her mouth flattened into a straight line. She grabbed her polished brass whistle, running her thumb over the metal. The mention of extravagant money did not impress her. It built a wall between them. No, Harper said, her voice firm. Lennox blinked, caught off guard. He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a sudden spike of anxiety. Do you Dislike the Summit restaurant? I can buy out the gallery downtown instead. You do not understand, Harper explained, her tone softening a fraction. I do not want your money. I do not want a massive display of wealth. My family lost everything because a leader decided to throw money around without accountability. Extravagance does not make me feel safe. It makes me feel like a purchased item. The words hit Lennox like a swift punch to the gut. He remembered the pain he saw in her eyes earlier. He cursed his own stupidity. He tried to offer her the world, but he offered it the wrong way. She did not want his treasury. She wanted genuine effort. I must show her the man behind the title, or I will lose her before I even start. You are right, Lennox said, nodding his head. He pulled his hands back from the desk, giving her space. I apologize. That was foolish of me. I am used to dealing with politicians who demand grand gestures. Harper tilted her head, her defensive posture relaxing. What are you offering instead? Lennox thought of the Bloodmoon forest. He thought of the places he went when he needed absolute quiet, away from the demands of his rank. A picnic. Just you and me. I know a hidden river deep in the woods. It is secluded. No reservations. No enforcers watching us eat. Just a thick fur blanket and some roasted game. Simple and honest. Harper considered the offer. She looked past his broad, corded chest, studying the genuine sincerity in his warm hazel eyes. The idea of a quiet, isolated river sounded appealing. It required no performance. A picnic, Harper repeated. No guards hovering over my shoulder? None, Lennox promised. A small, beautiful smile broke across her face. It hit Lennox harder than a physical blow. All right, Alpha, Harper said, picking up her pen. You have a date. But if you try to order a private chef to the woods, I will put you back in the timeout corner. Lennox chuckled, a sound of pure relief. Understood. I will do the cooking myself. Chapter 8. The weekend arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze. Lennox stood in the paved courtyard of the Bloodmoon estate. He focused on packing the trunk of his midnight blue, heavily armored SUV. He refused to delegate the task to his subordinates. He wanted every detail perfect. He placed a large woven basket into the trunk. Inside, he packed roasted venison, fresh bread, and sweet berries gathered from the estate gardens. Next to the basket, he laid down a thick, heavy fur blanket. He checked his pockets. His encrypted cell phone sat silent in the left pocket. His heavy silver pocket watch rested securely in its thick velvet pouch in his right pocket. The silver could not burn his skin through the velvet, but he kept it close as a family reminder. The crunch of gravel announced unwanted company. Lennox turned to see Finn, his beta, marching across the courtyard. 3 massive enforcers followed close behind. They wore dark combat gear, their expressions grim and focused. We are ready, Alpha, Finn stated, stopping near the rear bumper of the SUV. Lennox narrowed his hazel eyes. He shut the trunk with a solid thud. Ready for what? The escort, Finn said, gesturing to the enforcers. You are traveling to the deep river near the eastern border. The rogue scouts caused a $90,000 deficit at the mill last week. Caleb's faction is active. We need to secure the perimeter while you eat. Lennox felt a surge of frustration. The stress of leadership threatened to ruin his plans. He promised Harper absolute privacy. She wanted simplicity, not a military parade. If she saw 4 armed guards hovering around their picnic, she would assume he lied to her. No, Lennox commanded, crossing his arms over his broad chest. You are not coming to the river. The three enforcers exchanged nervous glances. Finn stepped forward, his jaw tight. Lennox, be reasonable. You are the king. You cannot wander into the deep woods without backup. It is a tactical error. My pack views me as a vital asset to protect, but today I just want to be a man keeping a promise to a woman. I gave my word, Lennox growled, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. He did not use his alpha command, but the sheer force of his presence made the enforcers step back. She asked for a quiet afternoon. I will not surround her with a strike team. Finn stood his ground, though his shoulders tensed. What if Caleb tracks your scent? You cannot fight an entire rogue faction alone while protecting a civilian. I am fully capable of defending my mate, Lennox snapped, the words slipping out before he could stop it. The courtyard went dead silent. Finn's eyes widened. The enforcers straightened their posture, shock registering on their faces. Lennox had never claimed anyone before. The declaration shifted the entire dynamic of the argument. They were no longer discussing a casual date. They were discussing the future Luna of the Bloodmoon Pack. Finn cleared his throat, adjusting his stance. Understood, Alpha, but protocol demands we maintain a presence. Lennox sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He needed a compromise that kept his pack calm without breaking his promise to Harper. He opened the driver's side door of the SUV. Here are your orders, Lennox said, his tone leaving no room for debate. You will track my vehicle, but you will stay exactly 2 miles behind us at all times. You will not approach the river. You will not show your faces. If I hear a single twig snap from your boots, you will run border patrol for a month. Finn nodded, accepting the terms. 2 miles back. We will stay out of sight. See that you do, Lennox finished. He climbed into the driver's seat of the armored SUV and started the engine. The powerful motor roared to life. He drove out of the estate gates, heading toward the Silverpine town limits to pick up Harper. His heart hammered against his ribs in anticipation. He navigated the winding roads, leaving his enforcers far behind. He wanted to reach the hidden river and finally share the quiet peace he craved. Chapter 9. Lennox shifted the midnight blue armored SUV into park. The powerful engine cut off, leaving the forest quiet. He checked his rearview mirror. Finn and the enforcers remained 2 miles back, holding their position as ordered. Harper sat in the passenger seat, her bright eyes scanning the towering pine trees. A moment later, Maya pulled Harper's shimmering cherry blossom pink sedan into the clearing right behind the SUV, the tires crunching over dry leaves and snapped twigs. Lennox stepped out of the vehicle. He walked to the rear bumper and popped the heavy trunk. He reached inside and gripped the handles of the large woven basket. It contained the thick fur blanket, roasted venison, fresh bread, and sweet berries he prepared earlier. He shut the trunk with a firm thud. He felt the familiar weight of his encrypted cell phone in his left pocket and the velvet pouch holding his silver watch in his right. Both items grounded him. "Follow me," Lennox said, guiding the two women toward a narrow dirt trail. Harper walked behind him, her heavy canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. Maya trailed at the rear, tapping her thick hardback planner against her thigh. The dense canopy blocked out the lingering twilight. Lennox used his broad shoulders to push low-hanging branches out of their path, ensuring Harper had a clear walkway. "I should have worn boots," Maya muttered, stepping over an exposed tree root. "This dirt is ruining my flats." "You insisted on coming," Harper reminded her sister, her voice light and teasing. The sound of rushing water grew louder. The tree line broke, revealing a wide, hidden river. Silver moonlight reflected off the steady current. Smooth, dark stones lined the riverbank. Lennox walked to a flat patch of soft grass near the water's edge. He set the woven basket down. He pulled out the thick fur blanket. He intended to flick his wrists and lay the fur out flat, aiming for a smooth gesture of confidence. The evening wind caught the heavy material instead. The blanket folded over itself, bunching up into an awkward, messy pile. Lennox frowned. He reached down to fix the corners. His combat boot nudged the basket, tipping it sideways. The loaf of fresh bread tumbled out, rolling across the grass. Harper pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a bright laugh. "Do you need a timeout to figure that out?" Lennox shot her a sideways glance. A boyish grin broke across his sharp jawline. He grabbed the bread, inspecting the crust for dirt. "I coordinate complex military strategies, but a picnic blanket defeats me in under a minute." "My enforcers usually handle the camp setups," Lennox admitted. He dropped to one knee, using his large hands to smooth the fur out flat. "I lack practice in the domestic arts." "It shows," Maya noted, her tone blunt. Maya surveyed the scene. She looked at the thick fur blanket, the moonlit river, and the towering alpha king smoothing the edges for her sister. She let out a long sigh. She pulled her cell phone from her pocket and tapped the blank black screen with a manicured finger. "Oh no," Maya announced, infusing her voice with fake panic. "The caterer for next week's gala just canceled. I need to handle this crisis right now." Harper crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow at her sister. "Your screen is black, Maya. No one called you. The phone did not ring." "It is a silent emergency," Maya countered without missing a beat. She turned around, pointing her planner back up the trail. "I will take your sedan, Harper. I need quiet to yell at this imaginary vendor. Do not do anything stupid. Enjoy the bread." Harper shook her head as Maya marched back into the trees. A few minutes later, the engine of the cherry blossom pink sedan roared to life. The sound faded down the mountain road, leaving the forest in total isolation. Lennox stood up. The tension in his corded chest melted away. He gestured to the organized fur blanket. "Please, sit." Harper stepped forward. She dropped her canvas tote bag next to the basket and sat down. She smoothed the skirt of her practical dress, letting the fabric pool around her knees. Lennox sat across from her, folding his long legs. He pulled the container of roasted venison and the sweet berries from the basket. The space between them felt charged, crackling with a wild energy. The river continued its steady rush, masking the silence. They were alone at last, far away from the demands of his rank. Chapter 10. Harper finished the last piece of roasted venison. She picked up a sweet berry from the woven basket and popped it into her mouth. The food tasted rich. Lennox proved to be an excellent cook, making up for his clumsy battle with the picnic blanket. He ate with the massive appetite of a working alpha, clearing his portion with ruthless speed. Harper wiped her hands on a cloth napkin. The moon climbed higher above the tree line, casting a bright silver glow over the rushing water. The forest sounds shifted. Crickets chirped in a steady rhythm, replacing the earlier silence. Lennox rested his forearms on his knees. He pointed toward the riverbank. "The current is gentle tonight. We should swim." Harper looked at the dark water, then back at him. "I did not pack a swimsuit in my tote bag. I planned for a picnic, not a pool party." "Neither did I," Lennox said. His warm hazel eyes gleamed with a playful challenge. He stood up, his towering frame blocking the moonlight. Harper felt a sudden thrilling rush of adrenaline. She refused to back down from a challenge. She stood up from the thick fur blanket. Reaching behind her back, she unzipped her practical floral dress. The fabric slid off her shoulders, pooling around her ankles. She stood in her simple undergarments. She reached up and unfastened the sturdy claw clip, letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders. Lennox mirrored her actions. He grabbed the hem of his tailored dark shirt and pulled it over his head. The bright moonlight hit his broad, corded chest. Thick, defined muscles shifted under his skin with every movement. Silver scars traced jagged lines across his ribs and shoulders, acting as permanent records of his past territory battles. He kicked off his heavy combat boots. He emptied his pockets with precision. He placed his encrypted black cell phone, his leather wallet, and the thick velvet pouch holding his silver pocket watch onto his discarded shirt. He kept the velvet pouch wrapped tight, ensuring the toxic silver remained contained. He unfastened his trousers, leaving them on the grass. I know I should look away to preserve my modesty, but I refuse to miss a single second of this spectacular view, Harper thought, her heart drumming a frantic beat against her ribs. Lennox led the way to the water's edge. He stepped into the river without hesitation. Harper followed close behind. Her bare toes curled against the smooth, wet stones lining the bank. The water hit her skin with an icy shock, a sharp contrast to the warm evening air. She waded in deeper, the river reaching her knees. The chill crept up her legs, threatening to make her shiver. Her werewolf physiology responded in an instant. Her core body temperature, running hotter than a normal human, flared to life. The inner heat pushed the cold away, acting as an internal furnace. The freezing water transformed into a refreshing, pleasant embrace. Lennox stood waist-deep in the steady current. He turned to face her. Droplets of water caught in his dark hair and rolled down his sharp jawline. He extended a large, calloused hand toward her. Harper closed the distance. She placed her fingers in his open palm. His grip felt solid, anchoring her against the pull of the river. He pulled her a step closer. The water swirled around their waists. The playful, teasing energy of the picnic faded, replaced by something deep and magnetic. The space between them vanished. Harper looked up into his face. He did not project his heavy alpha aura. He did not act like a king expecting blind obedience from a subject. He acted like a man standing in front of his equal. "You are staring, teacher," Lennox murmured, his voice a low rumble over the rushing water. "You are standing in a river in your underwear," Harper fired back, a sassy, confident grin forming on her lips. "I am allowed to look at the scenery." Lennox let out a rich chuckle. He brought his free hand up from the water. He brushed the back of his knuckles against her wet cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. The simple touch sent a jolt of raw heat straight to her core. The chemistry between them felt like a living thing, humming with undeniable power. Harper leaned into his hand. She felt secure. The secluded river offered a perfect sanctuary. No enforcers lurked in the trees to monitor their actions. No rogue scouts plotted in the shadows. It was just the two of them, testing the deep waters of a brand new bond. Chapter 11. The steady current pushed against their waists. Lennox kept his grip on Harper's hand. He guided her toward a massive, flat boulder resting near the riverbank. The dark water flowed over the smooth surface of the stone, creating a shallow seat. They sat side by side, water swirling around their hips. The night breeze brushed against Harper's bare shoulders, but Lennox's radiant, high body heat kept the chill away. He felt like a human furnace beside her. Lennox traced circles on the back of her hand with his thumb. "You told Maya you put me in a timeout. You do not fear my alpha command." Harper watched the moon's reflection ripple on the water's surface. Fear is a useless emotion. It does not stop bad things from happening. It just leaves you paralyzed. Lennox tilted his head, his hazel eyes studying her profile. "Who taught you that lesson?" Harper took a slow, deep breath. She kept her past locked away. She filled her days with demanding toddlers and thick lesson planners to avoid dwelling on old wounds. Sitting beside Lennox felt different. The safety of his presence invited the truth. "My previous pack leader," Harper said, keeping her voice level. "My family owned a massive stretch of fertile land in a neighboring valley. We managed the crops for 4 generations. Our former alpha claimed he needed the acreage for a new pack defense project. He forced a strict mandate and seized our property deed." Lennox stopped tracing circles on her hand. His sharp jawline tightened. "A forced seizure requires full council approval and immediate financial compensation." "He bypassed the council," Harper explained, her tone turning bitter. "He forged the territorial safety documents. He sold our land to a human commercial developer the very next week and pocketed the profit. The theft caused a direct $200,000 financial ruin for my parents. It wiped out our entire legacy in 3 days. We lost everything." Lennox stared at the rushing river. The thick muscles in his corded chest flexed. Raw anger radiated from him, hot and sharp. Hearing her pain hit him like a brutal punch to the gut. A true alpha existed to shield his people. A leader who stole from his own pack deserved a quick, bloody execution. "If he offers me a pity handout right now, I will get out of this water and walk all the way back to town," Harper thought, bracing herself for a wealthy man's typical response. Lennox did not make a grand gesture. He did not offer to write a check from the Bloodmoon treasury to replace the stolen money. He understood her core nature. She demanded strict accountability, not a massive charity donation. Instead, Lennox squeezed her fingers, offering a grounding pressure. "He broke the most sacred oath a leader can take. He failed your family. He failed you." Harper let out a shaky breath. The tension in her shoulders snapped. He understood. He validated her righteous anger instead of trying to buy her forgiveness with a massive display of wealth. "My parents lost their farmhouse," Harper continued, the words flowing with ease. "We packed our bags and moved to a tiny apartment in Silverpine. I took the lead teacher job at the academy to help pay the rent. I learned that blind trust in a dominant alpha is a dangerous game. Rank means nothing without integrity." Lennox shifted on the boulder, turning his torso to face her. He reached out, his calloused fingers tucking a wet strand of hair behind her ear. "You demand integrity. You put me in a corner because I broke the peace of your classroom. You held me accountable. You treat me like a man, not a scary title." "You earned that timeout," Harper teased. A genuine soft smile broke across her lips, easing the heavy sadness of her memories. "I did," Lennox agreed, his voice a low rumble. His warm hazel eyes locked onto hers, burning with a fierce, protective light. "I cannot rewrite your past, Harper, but I give you my word. I will never leverage my rank against you. I protect my people, and I protect my mate. Always." The raw conviction in his voice rang true. He offered a permanent shield. Harper leaned closer, resting her head against his broad shoulder. She listened to the steady, strong beat of his heart. The tall defensive walls she built around her mind began to crumble, brick by heavy brick. Chapter 12. Lennox wrapped his thick arm around Harper's waist, pulling her flush against his side. Holding her close on the submerged boulder felt like the most natural action of his life. He rested his chin against the top of her wet hair. Her scent of sun-warmed peaches and fresh linen drifted up, washing over his heightened senses. The aroma quieted his inner wolf, replacing his primal instincts with a deep, profound peace. My turn for a confession, Lennox murmured, his deep voice carrying over the rushing water. Harper shifted her weight, turning her head to look up at his face. I am listening. Leading the Bloodmoon Pack feels like carrying a heavy stone up a steep mountain, Lennox admitted. He hated showing vulnerability. His rank demanded an image of unbreakable strength, but he needed her to see his genuine truth. Every choice I make risks a life. Last week, rogue scouts breached our eastern border. They slipped past the perimeter and sabotaged our main lumber mill. Finn mentioned a perimeter breach in the hallway, Harper said, her fingers tracing a slow, light pattern across his wet chest. The sabotage caused a direct $90,000 deficit in our weekly exports, Lennox continued. His sharp jawline tightened at the bitter memory. But the financial loss is the easy part. A man named Caleb commands that rogue faction. He wants to steal my territory. He will butcher my people to take the land. Every time I send an enforcer on a night patrol, I wonder if I am sending a good man to his death. Harper did not offer empty comfort. She did not tell him his fears were foolish. She offered the pragmatic, steady support of a true partner. You secure the borders. You train your fighters to survive, Harper stated, her voice calm and firm. You cannot control Caleb's cruelty. You only control your response to his attacks. Your enforcers follow your orders because they trust your battle judgment, not because you are perfect. Lennox let out a long sigh, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. They follow me because I am the strongest fighter in the territory. But raw strength does not solve every problem. The stress builds up. I get angry. I lose my temper. I pace the estate halls and bark harsh orders at my friends. And then you sit on a tiny wooden stool in a timeout corner, Harper reminded him, a bright, playful spark returning to her observant eyes. Lennox threw his head back and let out a rich laugh. The lingering tension melted from his thick muscles. The crushing burden of his alpha crown felt much lighter with her sitting beside him in the cool river. She balances my chaotic fire with her unshakable calm, proving she is the exact missing piece my soul demands, Lennox realized, his heart drumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. My enforcers hover over my shoulder because they fear losing their leader, Lennox explained, his tone softening. But their constant presence suffocates my mind. I needed quiet. I needed a sanctuary. I never expected to find my safe haven in a kindergarten classroom. Harper smiled, her hand resting flat over his powerful heart. My classroom is a designated safe zone. The rules protect everyone inside the room. That includes grumpy, stressed alphas. Lennox reached down and cupped her face with both hands. His calloused thumbs brushed over her wet cheekbones. She did not demand a flawless king. She accepted the exhausted, flawed man underneath the intimidating title. She provided the care and strict accountability he needed to stay grounded. You are my missing piece, Harper, Lennox declared, his voice thick with raw emotion. He leaned down, closing the small distance between them. He pressed his lips to hers. The kiss began slow, a tender, careful exploration of their new bond. Harper responded with bright passion, her hand sliding up to grip his thick, corded shoulders. The kiss deepened. A wild, powerful heat ignited between them, burning hotter than their werewolf body temperatures. The rushing river, the dark forest, and the looming threat of the rogues faded away. Lennox poured all his unspoken fears and his fierce devotion into the physical connection. He found his mate, and he refused to let her go. Chapter 13. The kiss ended, leaving a charged silence in its wake. The rushing water of the hidden river swirled around their waists, cool against their heated skin. Lennox pulled back, a wicked gleam replacing the intense vulnerability in his warm hazel eyes. He dropped his hands from Harper's face. He scooped a palm full of river water and splashed it directly at her collarbone. Harper gasped, the sudden chill breaking the heavy emotional mood. She wiped her face, her eyes narrowing in a playful glare. She slapped the surface of the river, sending a wave of water crashing against his broad chest. Lennox laughed, a rich, booming sound that echoed through the dark pine trees. He turned and waded toward the riverbank, his powerful legs pushing through the steady current with ease. Harper followed him out of the water. Their bare feet hit the smooth stones lining the shore. The night breeze swept over the bank. Lennox reached the edge of the thick fur blanket. He unfastened his soaped undergarments and stepped out of them, tossing the wet fabric onto the stones safely away from his tailored dark shirt. The encrypted black cell phone, his leather wallet, and the thick velvet pouch holding his silver pocket watch remained secure on top of the dry clothing. Harper mirrored his actions. She discarded her wet undergarments, placing them next to her heavy canvas tote bag and her thick hardback lesson planner. She stood bare in the silver moonlight, her skin glowing. The internal furnace of their werewolf physiology flared, burning away the cold night air. Lennox took 3 steps into the clearing, putting distance between himself and the picnic supplies. He rolled his thick shoulders, preparing for the change. I will show her the absolute freedom of the forest, far away from politics and ledgers, Lennox thought, letting his human consciousness slip backward. The shift began. The transformation required a brutal toll on the body. Bones snapped and cracked, breaking apart to reform into new, wild shapes. Muscles tore and reknitted in a matter of seconds. The pain flared hot and sharp, but Lennox took the sting without a flinch. Years of practice turned the agony into a familiar rush. In a blur of motion, the towering king vanished. A massive timber wolf stood in his place. His fur matched the dark shadows of the forest, thick and coarse. He stood as tall as a pony, his massive paws digging into the soft dirt. He bowed his large head, letting out a low, playful huff. Harper smiled. She focused her mind, calling her own wolf to the surface. Her shift felt sharper, a quick sequence of breaking bones and snapping joints. She embraced the familiar sting. A moment later, she stood on 4 paws. Her omega wolf form presented a stark contrast to Lennox. She possessed a sleek, agile build with shimmering silver-gray fur and bright, observant eyes. Lennox nudged her shoulder with his wet nose. He spun around, kicking up a cloud of loose dirt, and bolted into the tree line. Harper barked a challenge. Her powerful hind legs pushed off the dirt bank. She dashed after him, leaving the river, the armored SUV, and their discarded clothes far behind. Chapter 14. The forest transformed into a playground of shadows and moonlight. Harper chased Lennox through the thick, ancient trees. Her paws struck the forest floor in a rapid, rhythmic drumbeat. Werewolf speed blurred the landscape. Giant pine trunks zipped past her vision. The wind rushed through her silver-gray fur. Lennox ran ahead, a massive dark shape weaving through the woods. He relied on raw power, his giant strides chewing up the distance. He leaped over a fallen, rotting log with effortless grace. Harper relied on her agility. Instead of jumping the log, she ducked her head, sliding underneath the natural archway in a seamless burst of speed. She popped up on the other side, gaining ground. She snapped her jaws, nipping playfully at his thick hind leg. Lennox dodged the bite, swerving to the right. He bounded up a steep embankment, his claws tearing chunks of dirt from the hill. Harper scrambled up behind him. The thrill of the chase ignited her blood. The heavy burdens of her teaching schedule, the strict academy rules, and the lingering trauma of her old pack vanished. For the first time in years, I am running towards something instead of running away, Harper thought, pushing her muscles to their absolute limit. They crested the hill and entered a wide clearing blanketed in soft, vibrant green moss. Lennox slowed his pace, turning his massive head to look back at her. He offered a wide, wolfish grin, his fangs catching the moonlight. He dropped his front half low to the ground in a classic play bow. Harper did not stop. She launched her sleek body through the air, tackling his broad chest. The force sent them both tumbling into the moss. They rolled over the soft ground, a tangle of dark and silver fur. Lennox pinned her down, his giant paws resting gently on her shoulders. He let out a rumbling purr, a sound of pure contentment. Harper squirmed, kicking her hind legs, trying to break his hold. The physical wrestling matched the electric chemistry they shared by the river. A sudden shift in the wind stopped their game. Lennox went rigid. His ears swiveled forward, standing straight up. The fur along his spine raised into a jagged ridge. Harper stopped struggling. She flared her nostrils, pulling in the night air. The forest lost its natural earthy aroma. A sharp, chemical odor burned the inside of her snout. It smelled like crushed rot and bitter poison. Thick, purple smoke began rolling through the trees at the edge of the clearing. The fog slithered over the moss, moving with unnatural speed. It was not a campfire. It was wolfsbane. The toxic smoke drifted closer, the purple tendrils curling around the trunks of the pine trees. Harper felt an immediate, sickening wave of dizziness. The poison attacked her werewolf physiology on contact, suppressing the wild animal half of her mind. Her limbs grew heavy. Lennox let out a sharp, warning bark. He scrambled off her, his massive body swaying as the toxic air filled his lungs. The playful date was over. Chapter 15. The toxic purple smoke flooded the clearing, choking the breathable air. The wolfsbane forced a brutal reaction. The poison suppressed their animal forms, triggering an involuntary, agonizing reverse shift. Lennox crashed onto the moss, his bones snapping back into human configuration. The transition lacked the practiced grace of a voluntary shift. It felt like a violent tearing of muscle and sinew. He hit the ground as a naked man, gasping for oxygen. The burning in his lungs intensified with every breath. Harper materialized beside him, her bare skin pressing against the damp moss. She curled into a tight ball, coughing hard. The dizziness hit her like a physical blow. The world spun in circles. Her fast healing abilities vanished, neutralized by the airborne poison. Lennox forced himself onto his hands and knees. He fought the crippling weakness invading his limbs. He needed to assess their tactical situation. He scanned the dark tree line. They had sprinted a quarter-mile away from the hidden river. I left my encrypted phone resting on my shirt, leaving us completely cut off from Finn and the strike team, Lennox thought, a cold spike of dread hitting his gut. The midnight blue SUV, the heavy canvas tote bag, and the velvet pouch containing his silver watch sat useless on the distant riverbank. They possessed no weapons, no armor, and no way to signal the enforcers waiting 2 miles down the mountain road. They were stranded in the deep woods, completely exposed. "Get up," Lennox urged, his voice harsh and raspy. He reached out, grabbing Harper's bare arm. He pulled her to her feet. She stumbled, her legs trembling under the effects of the toxic fog. Lennox wrapped his thick arm around her waist, supporting her weight. He dragged her away from the thickest concentration of the purple smoke. They staggered toward the edge of the clearing, seeking the cover of the dense woods. A massive, ancient oak tree stood near the tree line. Its trunk spanned 10 feet across, offering a solid barrier. Lennox pulled Harper behind the rough bark, shielding her from the open clearing. "Keep your head down," Lennox whispered, pressing his broad back against the wood. Harper leaned against the tree, pressing a hand over her mouth to muffle her coughing. Her bright eyes watered from the bitter smoke. She looked at Lennox. His heavily corded chest heaved. The silver scars on his ribs stood out stark white in the moonlight. He possessed no armor to deflect an attack, but his jaw remained set in a fierce, unyielding line. The crunch of heavy boots echoed through the forest. The sound cut through the silence, growing louder with every passing second. Footsteps approached from the north, south, and east, forming a deliberate semicircle around their position. Lennox clenched his fists. The rogues did not stumble upon them by accident. The wolfsbane smoke bomb proved this was a calculated ambush. The enemy tracked them, waited for them to leave the safety of the riverbank, and deployed the poison to strip away their wolf forms. A voice rang out from the center of the clearing, loud and mocking. "Come out, King Lennox! The game is over!" Chapter 16. The mocking voice echoed through the purple fog. Heavy boots stomped onto the soft moss of the clearing. Lennox peeked around the edge of the massive oak tree. The smoke thinned slightly, revealing the intruders. 20 rogue fighters emerged from the shadows. They wore dark, ragged tactical gear. Their expressions mirrored the brutal, lawless nature of their faction. They formed a tight half-circle blocking the path back to the river and the armored SUV. A man stepped to the front of the pack. Alpha Caleb carried a rugged, scarred face. A jagged white line crossed his left cheek, pulling his mouth into a constant scowl. He wore a heavy leather vest and thick dragonhide gloves. The specialized, scaled material covered his hands and forearms, providing a total barrier against toxic metals. Caleb held a long, gleaming silver broadsword. The lethal blade reflected the moonlight, casting harsh white flashes across the clearing. A single cut from that sword would poison the bloodstream and rot werewolf flesh. Harper peered around Lennox's shoulder. She saw the 20 armed fighters and the cruel glint of the silver weapon. The wolfsbane still clouded her mind, making her limbs feel like lead. They stood bare-skinned against a heavily armed execution squad. "We possess 0 weapons and 0 backup, but I refuse to let him face this firing squad alone," Harper thought, her heart drumming a frantic, defiant rhythm. She stood up straight, ignoring the dizziness. She refused to cower behind the tree like a helpless victim. She placed her hand on Lennox's back, a silent promise of support. Lennox felt her touch. A fierce, primal, protective urge eclipsed the pain in his lungs. He would not let Caleb touch a single hair on her head. He pushed away from the oak trunk. He stepped out into the open clearing, putting his broad, corded chest directly between Harper and the rogue Alpha. Lennox stood tall, completely ignoring his lack of clothing or armor. He projected his heavy alpha aura, pushing his dominant energy through the toxic air. "You bring smoke and silver because you fear a fair fight, Caleb," Lennox roared, his deep voice shaking the pine needles from the branches above. Caleb let out a harsh, barking laugh. He rested the flat of the silver broadsword against his dragonhide glove. "I bring silver because I want a guaranteed kill. You ruined my lumber mill operation. You owe me $90,000, Lennox. I plan to take it out of your hide." Caleb's eyes shifted, landing on Harper standing behind the king. A wicked, cruel smile stretched across the rogue's scarred face. "And look what we have here," Caleb sneered, taking a step forward. "A pretty little Omega. Once I take your head, Lennox, I think I will claim her for my own tent." The threat snapped the last thread of Lennox's control. His warm hazel eyes bled into a glowing, lethal gold. He crouched low, his thick leg muscles coiling like steel springs. The wolfsbane suppressed his ability to shift, but it could not erase his raw, brutal strength. He prepared to charge bare-handed into the silver blade. Chapter 17. Alpha. Caleb raised his left hand. The thick dragon-hide glove absorbed the ambient moonlight, the scaled material dull and rugged. He gripped the hilt of the gleaming silver broadsword with his right. A wicked, cruel smile stretched the jagged white scar across his cheek. The 20 rogue fighters tightened their half-circle formation. They drew iron blades and heavy steel pipes, their boots crushing the soft green moss. Toxic purple smoke curled around Lennox's bare ankles. The wolfsbane burned his lungs with every breath, sending sharp spikes of dizziness through his skull. The poison demanded he stay in his vulnerable human form. It fought his primal nature, suppressing the beast beneath his skin. Lennox refused to yield. "I will endure 1,000 broken bones before I let this scarred coward touch my mate," Lennox vowed, locking his glowing gold eyes onto Caleb. He planted his bare feet into the dirt. He called upon his inner wolf, dragging the beast to the surface through sheer, brute willpower. The shift began. Without a clear mind, the transformation became absolute agony. His human bones did not reshape with their usual fluid grace. They snapped like dry branches under a heavy boot. His muscles tore and re-knitted in violent, jarring spasms. Lennox let out a raw, guttural roar as his spine elongated. The pain rivaled the burn of a silver blade, but he pushed past the torment. The towering Alpha King vanished. A massive, dark timber wolf took his place. He stood as tall as a pony, his thick fur bristling along his spine. He bared his fangs, snapping his jaws at the nearest rogue. Caleb lowered his sword. "Kill the king! Take the Omega!" The rogues charged. 3 fighters rushed Lennox at once. The Timberwolf lunged forward, meeting their assault with devastating force. He clamped his massive jaws around a steel pipe, ripping the weapon from a fighter's hands. He swiped his giant paw, sending the man crashing into the trunk of the massive oak tree. Harper remained behind the oak, her bare back pressed against the rough bark. The wolfsbane fog clouded her vision. Her limbs felt heavy, weighed down by the bitter chemical rot filling the air. She watched Lennox fight. He held off 3 men, but 4 more circled behind him. He possessed raw power, but the poison slowed his reaction time. He needed backup. She remembered the devastating financial ruin her old Alpha caused. She remembered hiding in a tiny apartment, feeling powerless. She placed her hands on the bark of the oak tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She pushed herself away from the tree. She embraced the agonizing sting of the forced shift. Her transition mirrored Lennox's brutal ordeal. Her joints cracked with sharp, white-hot bursts of pain. Her human skin stretched and tore, giving way to shimmering silver-gray fur. She bit her tongue, tasting copper, refusing to whimper. She forced her body to complete the sequence. The sleek Omega wolf materialized in the toxic fog. She shook her head, fighting the lingering dizziness. She bolted into the fray, her paws silent on the moss. A rogue raised an iron blade, aiming for Lennox's blindside. Harper launched her agile body through the air. Her jaws clamped down on the man's wrist. Her fangs sank deep into the flesh, forcing him to drop the weapon. The rogue screamed. Harper twisted her neck, throwing the man to the ground. Lennox turned his massive head. His glowing gold eyes met her bright, observant ones. He let out a low, rumbling bark of approval. Harper took her position at his side, pressing her silver-gray flank against his dark fur. They stood back to back, a united front against the encroaching swarm. The rogues hesitated, unnerved by the sheer ferocity of the two wolves standing firm in the poison fog. Chapter 18. The forest transformed into a chaotic battlefield. The rogue fighters recovered from their initial shock and pressed their attack. 20 men armed with iron and steel swarmed the two wolves. The clash of metal against bone echoed through the dark pine trees. Harper stayed low to the ground. Her sleek, silver-gray frame offered a smaller target. A rogue lunged at her, swinging a heavy steel pipe. Harper ducked, the metal whistling mere inches above her ears. She pivoted on her hind legs and snapped her jaws. Her fangs caught the fabric of the man's tactical pants, tearing a massive chunk from the material and sending him stumbling backward into the dirt. Despite her agility, the wolfsbane smoke exacted a heavy toll. The purple fog drifted in thick, suffocating clouds. Every breath burned. Her usual lightning-fast reflexes felt sluggish, as if she moved through deep water. I survived the loss of my family legacy, and I will not become a victim in this dirt, Harper thought, her heart drumming a frantic beat against her ribs. Lennox fought with the brutal, unyielding strength of a true alpha. A rogue rushed him with a drawn blade. Lennox did not dodge. He rammed his massive, dark shoulder into the attacker's chest, launching the man through the air. The rogue hit a pine trunk with a sickening crunch and slumped into the shadows. But the enemy numbers proved overwhelming. For every fighter they incapacitated, 2 more stepped forward to take his place. Caleb hung back near the edge of the clearing, his scarred face twisted into a scowl. The rogue leader gripped his silver broadsword with his dragonhide gloves, waiting for the poison to finish exhausting his prey. "Keep pushing them!" Caleb ordered, his voice cutting through the noise. "The smoke will drop them!" The rogues formed a wall of swinging weapons, forcing Lennox and Harper to yield ground. Lennox snapped his jaws, driving a man back, but another fighter jabbed a pipe into his flank. The alpha let out a sharp growl, taking a step backward to protect his injured side. Harper covered his retreat, biting at the ankles of any man who pushed too close. Step by agonizing step, the enemy forced them out of the mossy clearing. They retreated down the narrow dirt trail. The quarter-mile distance to the hidden river felt like an endless marathon. Harper's lungs screamed for clean oxygen. Her paws slipped on exposed tree roots. She kept her flank pressed against Lennox, relying on his massive bulk to anchor her. He acted as an unbreakable shield, absorbing the brunt of the assault to keep the weapons away from her. They reached the end of the tree line. The sound of rushing water grew loud, drowning out the shouts of the rogues. Silver moonlight pierced the canopy, illuminating the smooth stones of the riverbank. Harper spotted her cherry blossom pink sedan was gone, but Lennox's midnight blue armored SUV sat parked in the shadows. Near the water's edge, their discarded clothes lay in a neat pile. The heavy canvas tote bag and the thick hardback lesson planner sat untouched. Lennox's encrypted cell phone, his leather wallet, and the thick velvet pouch holding his silver pocket watch remained resting on his tailored dark shirt. The rogues fanned out, forming a semicircle that trapped the two wolves against the river. The deep water blocked their retreat. They had no place left to run. Chapter 19. Lennox planted his massive paws on the smooth river stones. The cold water rushed behind him, cutting off any avenue of escape. His chest heaved, pulling in the toxic air. The wolfsbane burned his bloodstream, neutralizing his fast healing abilities. The shallow cuts and bruises along his flanks throbbed with raw pain. He stared at the encroaching wall of rogue fighters. Caleb stepped to the front of the pack, the gleaming silver broadsword catching the moonlight. The rogue alpha adjusted his thick dragonhide gloves, a triumphant smirk ruining his scarred face. Lennox felt Harper's silver-gray fur brush against his side. Her breathing sounded ragged and forced. The poison drained her stamina. She fought with the bravery of a seasoned warrior, but she was a teacher, not a soldier. I promised to protect my mate, and I will turn this river red before I break that vow, Lennox resolved, his gold eyes burning with lethal intent. Caleb raised the silver sword. Take the king's head. Leave the Omega breathing. The rogues raised their iron blades and surged forward. Lennox tensed his thick hind legs, preparing to launch his massive body into a suicidal charge. He planned to take Caleb's throat before the silver blade could end his life. A deafening, earth-shattering howl ripped through the night air. The sound did not come from Lennox. It originated from the mountain road leading to the riverbank. The pure, dominant force of the howl froze the rogue fighters in their tracks. Caleb lowered his sword, his head snapping toward the tree line. 4 massive wolves exploded from the dark pine trees. Finn, the loyal beta, led the charge. His russet-brown fur blurred as he cleared the distance in seconds. 3 towering enforcers flanked him, their forms built for absolute war. Hearing the king's agonizing roar echo across the mountain, they had broken protocol and tracked him through the toxic smoke, closing the 2-mile gap with terrifying speed. The enforcers crashed into the rogue formation like a freight train hitting a brick wall. The impact sent fighters flying into the dirt. Finn clamped his jaws around a rogue's shoulder, tearing the man away from the riverbank. An enforcer tackled 2 men at once, their heavy bodies crushing the soft grass. The sheer brutality of the Bloodmoon elite turned the tide of the battle in an instant. Lennox let out a booming roar, the sound fueling his subordinates. The arrival of his pack sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through his veins. He pushed the wolfsbane weakness aside and rejoined the fray. He threw his massive bulk into a rogue swinging a pipe, crushing the man's ribs with a single strike. Harper stayed near the river, guarding the pile of discarded clothes. She watched the enforcers dismantle Caleb's strike team. The rogue fighters lacked the discipline and raw power of the trained Bloodmoon guards. Iron blades fell to the stones. Men scrambled backward, trying to flee into the forest, but the enforcers cut off their escape routes. The trap was broken. The overwhelming numbers vanished, replaced by the lethal efficiency of Lennox's trusted friends. The riverbank became a zone of pure devastation for the enemy faction. Caleb realized his ambush had failed. His men fell one by one, their bodies littering the dirt. The rogue alpha backed away, his scowl deepening into a mask of pure panic. Chapter 20. The chaos of the melee consumed the riverbank. Bloodmoon enforcers ripped through the remaining rogue fighters, securing the perimeter with ruthless precision. Finn pinned a struggling man to the dirt, his russet brown fur stained with combat. The enemy numbers dwindled to nothing. Alpha Caleb stood near the center of the carnage, his chest heaving. His strike team was decimated. He gripped the hilt of his silver broadsword, his thick dragon hide gloves creaking under the pressure. He realized he could not defeat the enforcers, and he could not kill the king. His coup had failed in absolute ruin. Caleb's desperate eyes scanned the riverbank. They locked onto Harper. She stood near the discarded pile of clothing, her sleek, silver-gray fur illuminated by the moonlight. She was the Omega. She was the mate. Caleb's scarred face twisted into a mask of pure, vindictive spite. If he could not take the territory, he would shatter the king's heart before he died. Caleb raised the broadsword and charged. He bypassed the brawling wolves, sprinting straight for Harper. Harper saw the rogue alpha coming. She braced her paws against the smooth river stones. The toxic wolfsbane fog still clouded her mind, making her limbs feel encased in wet cement. She tried to dodge, to push her agile body out of the weapon's path, but her muscles refused to fire in time. The silver blade arced through the air, aimed directly at her neck. I finally found a safe home, and the universe is ripping it away, Harper thought, her heart stopping in her chest. A massive, dark shadow eclipsed the moonlight. Lennox lunged across the stones. He threw his giant timber wolf body into the space between Caleb and Harper. He did not have time to snap his jaws or disarm the rogue. He only had time to act as a living shield. The silver broadsword struck Lennox's broad chest. The lethal metal sliced through his thick fur and parted his flesh. A sickening hiss filled the air as the silver burned his skin on contact. The poison flooded his bloodstream instantly, acting like a violent acid. Lennox let out a raw, agonizing roar. The momentum of the strike threw him backward. The sheer trauma of the silver poison broke his wolf form. The transformation failed, reversing the shift in a violent snap of breaking bones. Lennox hit the river stones as a bare-skinned human. A devastating, deep gash ruined his corded chest. Blood poured from the wound, dark and thick. His fast healing abilities remained completely paralyzed by the toxic metal. Caleb ripped the sword free, preparing for a second fatal strike. Before the rogue could swing, Finn tackled him from the blind side. The beta's massive jaws clamped around Caleb's arm, crushing the bone through the dragonhide glove. Caleb screamed, dropping the silver broadsword. The weapon clattered against the stones. 2 more enforcers swarmed the rogue alpha, pinning him face down in the dirt and securing his limbs. Harper reversed her shift, ignoring the pain of her bones reforming. She fell to her knees as a bare-skinned human. She ignored the cold river water splashing against her legs. She scrambled across the smooth stones, throwing herself down beside Lennox. His warm hazel eyes stared up at the dark canopy, glassy and unfocused. His chest barely moved. The silver poison raced through his veins, dragging the towering king toward absolute darkness. Chapter 21. Finn twisted Caleb's broken arm with brutal force. Bone cracked loud against the quiet rush of the river water. Caleb let out a piercing scream, dropping his chin to the dirt. The beta did not show mercy. He pressed his heavy combat boot into the center of the rogue alpha's back, pinning the man flat against the smooth stones. "Shackle him with heavy iron," Finn ordered the nearest enforcer, his voice a harsh, commanding bark. "Throw him in the back of the transport truck. Secure the perimeter and sweep the tree line for stragglers." 2 massive enforcers stepped forward. They grabbed Caleb by his boots. They dragged his thrashing body away from the riverbank, hauling him toward the mountain road. The rogue leader spit a mouthful of blood onto the grass. His scarred face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He shouted bitter threats, promising revenge, but his men were dead or scattered. His calculated ambush ended in absolute ruin. Finn ignored the shouts, focusing his attention on his fallen king. Harper paid 0 attention to the captured rogue. She remained on her knees in the freezing river water, bare-skinned and shivering. She focused her eyes on Lennox. The Alpha King laid flat on his back. A devastating, jagged gash ruined his broad, corded chest. Dark blood bubbled from the deep wound, spilling down his ribs to stain the wet stones. The silver weapon burned like toxic acid. Gray veins spiderwebbed outward from the cut, poisoning his entire bloodstream. The metal burned his flesh on contact. His werewolf physiology fought a losing battle. The poison paralyzed his fast healing abilities, leaving him vulnerable to the massive blood loss. "Lennox," Harper pleaded, her voice cracking. "Keep your eyes open. Look at me." Lennox stared up at the dark canopy of pine trees. His warm hazel eyes turned dull and glassy, losing their bright, lively spark. His chest barely moved. Each breath caused a wet, ragged wheeze to rattle in his throat. He lacked the strength to lift his head or speak. The silver drained his life force minute by minute. Finn rushed to Lennox's side. The beta shifted from his russet-brown wolf back to his human form. He pulled a spare pair of dark tactical pants from the emergency kit inside the armored SUV and secured them around his waist. Finn dropped to his knees next to Harper. He inspected the bubbling silver wound and let out a harsh curse. He placed 2 fingers against Lennox's neck, searching for a pulse. "His heart rate is dropping fast," Finn shouted, waving a frantic hand toward the tree line. "Bring the SUV to the edge of the grass. The silver is spreading. Move!" Harper forced her frozen limbs to obey. She scrambled across the wet river stones, her bare knees bruising against the hard rocks. She reached their pile of discarded items sitting near the water's edge. Her hands shook, but she grabbed her practical floral dress. She pulled the fabric over her head, covering her bare skin. The cotton material clung to her wet shoulders. She reached down and secured her heavy canvas tote bag, slinging the strap over her arm. She looked at the stones. Lennox's tailored dark shirt sat there, his encrypted cell phone, his leather wallet, and the thick velvet pouch holding his silver pocket watch rested on the dry fabric. She gathered the shirt, ensuring the toxic heirloom remained securely wrapped inside its thick velvet pouch before bundling the fabric around it. She refused to leave his belongings behind in the dirt. "I will not let this scarred coward destroy the safest home I have ever found," Harper thought, clutching the bundled shirt against her chest. An enforcer sprinted to the midnight blue armored SUV parked in the shadows. The heavy vehicle roared to life, its tires crunching over the stones as it pulled up to the edge of the riverbank. The rear doors swung open, revealing the dark, leather seats inside. Finn grabbed Lennox under the arms. A second enforcer grabbed the king's legs. They lifted his massive, dead-weight frame off the stones. Lennox let out a low, agonizing groan. The movement shifted the silver flakes buried inside his chest, causing fresh bursts of pain. Harper followed them, her bare feet slipping on the wet grass. The race against the toxic metal started right now. Chapter 22. Finn and the second enforcer muscled Lennox into the back of the midnight blue armored SUV. They laid the towering Alpha King across the rear bench. Dark blood soaked the premium leather seats in a matter of seconds. Finn slammed the heavy rear door shut. He ran around the vehicle and jumped into the driver's seat. Harper climbed into the back cabin through the opposite door. She dropped the bundled dark shirt onto the floorboards, keeping the velvet pouch safe. She knelt on the floor mat, hovering over Lennox. His massive body filled the space. The gray veins creeping across his corded chest looked darker and more pronounced. The poison marched straight toward his heart. "Hold on back there," Finn shouted over his shoulder. The beta slammed his boot onto the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared. The heavy SUV tore away from the riverbank, tires kicking up massive chunks of dirt and gravel. The vehicle bounced over the rough terrain of the mountain trail, knocking Harper against the passenger door. She braced her arm against the window panel, fighting to keep her balance in the speeding truck. She looked down at the wound. Blood poured from the jagged silver gash at an alarming rate. The silver flakes trapped inside the torn muscle prevented his blood from clotting. She needed to apply pressure. She needed a bandage, but she lacked medical supplies. Harper unzipped her heavy canvas tote bag. She shoved her hand inside the main compartment. Her fingers brushed past her thick, hardback lesson planner and a handful of spare pens. She searched the bottom of the bag and found a thick, white cotton towel. She packed the towel to clean up spilled paint in her classroom. Today, it served a grim new purpose. She pulled the towel free and folded it into a thick square. She leaned over Lennox and pressed the cotton fabric flat against the bubbling wound on his chest. Lennox gasped, his jaw clenched tight, the muscles in his neck popping. The pressure caused immense pain, but Harper could not stop. She locked her elbows and put her entire body weight behind her hands, pushing down on the cut. If his strong heart stops beating in the back of this truck, the rogue faction wins the war, Harper thought, grinding her teeth together. The pure white cotton turned bright crimson. The blood seeped through the layers of fabric, staining Harper's fingers. She kept her pressure steady. She refused to let up. The SUV hit a deep pothole, sending a violent jolt through the cabin. Harper slipped, her knees sliding across the floor mats, but she kept her hands locked on his chest. "Drive faster, Finn!" Harper yelled, her voice filled with raw panic. "I have the pedal to the floor," Finn fired back, gripping the steering wheel. "Keep him awake, Harper. Do not let him close his eyes." Harper looked at Lennox's face. His eyes fluttered shut. The pale color of his skin terrified her. His radiant, high body heat began to drop. The human furnace inside him flickered and faded, replaced by a cold, clammy chill. "Lennox," Harper demanded, leaning closer to his ear, "open your eyes. Look at me right now." He did not respond. The steady rise and fall of his chest turned into a shallow, erratic stutter. The wolfsbane fog wore off, but the silver poison dominated his system. "You owe me a proper picnic," Harper continued, her voice breaking. "You promised to cook without your enforcers watching. You gave me your word. An alpha never breaks his word." Lennox's left hand twitched on the leather seat. His fingers curled inward, brushing against her bare knee. It felt like a weak, desperate attempt at comfort. He heard her voice, but he lacked the strength to open his eyes. The bleeding slowed under the pressure of the thick towel, but the toxic silver remained lodged inside his flesh. They needed a healer. They needed specialized plant antidotes. The dark trees outside the window blurred past as the SUV raced down the mountain road, heading straight for the Bloodmoon estate. Chapter 23. The armored SUV breached the massive iron gates of the Bloodmoon estate. Finn did not slow down. He slammed the brakes right outside the double doors of the Pack medical wing. The heavy tires screeched against the pavement, leaving thick black marks on the concrete. Before the vehicle came to a complete stop, the rear doors flew open. A team of 4 Pack medics rushed out of the building. They pushed a heavy metal gurney across the courtyard, the wheels rattling over the pavement. Harper scrambled out of the SUV, her hands covered in dark, sticky blood. She grabbed her canvas tote bag and the bundled dark shirt from the floorboards. She stepped aside, giving the medics room to work. Finn jumped out of the driver's seat. He helped the medics pull Lennox from the back of the truck. They transferred the towering Alpha King onto the gurney. The white sheets turned red on contact. Lennox remained unconscious, his head rolling to the side. The thick cotton towel fell from his chest to the ground, soaked through and useless. "Silver poison!" Finn shouted, running alongside the gurney as the medics pushed it toward the building. "Deep chest wound! Get Clara!" Harper followed them, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor. They sprinted down the sterile white hallways of the medical wing. The bright fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh, unforgiving shadows over Lennox's pale face. The sharp sting of antiseptic chemicals filled the air. They crashed through the swinging doors of the main trauma room. Healer Clara stood waiting. She took command of the room in a flash. She wore thick, heavy, protective gauntlets that reached past her elbows. A sterile metal tray sat next to the operating table, holding an assortment of specialized tools and crushed green plant poultices. "Transfer him!" Clara ordered the medics. "Hold his shoulders down. The extraction will cause severe nerve pain." The medics slid Lennox onto the main trauma bed. They gripped his broad shoulders and pinned his arms to the mattress. Harper stepped back into the corner of the room, clutching her canvas tote bag against her chest. She watched the organized chaos unfold. Clara grabbed a pair of long, sterilized metal tongs from the tray. She leaned over Lennox's ruined chest. She plunged the tips of the tongs deep into the jagged gash. Lennox convulsed. A raw, guttural sound tore from his throat despite his unconscious state. His thick muscles flexed under the grip of the medics. He fought the pain, his body thrashing against the mattress. Clara ignored the struggle. She focused on the wound. She extracted a tiny, gleaming splinter of silver, shrapnel from where the heavy sword's edge had chipped against his ribs from the torn flesh. She dropped the shard into a metal basin. It clinked loud against the steel. She repeated the agonizing process. She dug the sterilized tongs into the wound again and again. 5 separate shards of silver hit the basin. The toxic metal fought the extraction, gripping the muscle fibers. "I have the shrapnel," Clara announced, dropping the tongs onto the tray. "Apply the wolfsbane antidote and the healing poultice." A medic rushed forward, pressing a thick layer of crushed green plants straight into the open wound. The poultice, designed to draw out the lingering poison, sizzled against the flesh. The strongest fighter in this territory is losing a brutal war against a few ounces of metal, Harper thought, a cold terror gripping her spine. A nurse attached circular monitor pads to Lennox's chest. A heart monitor screen near the wall flared to life. It displayed a frantic, erratic heartbeat. The green lines spiked and dropped in a chaotic rhythm. The silver poison traveled too deep into his bloodstream. It reached his heart muscle, destroying the tissue. Clara stared at the screen, her eyes wide with alarm. "His pressure's dropping. The poison reached his heart." The monitor released a single, loud beep. The erratic spikes vanished. The green line stretched across the screen, flat and unmoving. The frantic noise of the trauma room ceased. The flatline tone echoed off the white tile walls, a sound of absolute doom. Chapter 24. The piercing sound of the flatline filled the sterile trauma room. The continuous beep drilled into Harper's ears, freezing the blood in her veins. She stopped breathing. She stared at the green line on the monitor, waiting for it to jump back to life. It remained flat, an unyielding horizontal streak across the dark screen. "Push the antidote!" Clara shouted, her voice cracking with pure panic. The head healer grabbed a large plastic syringe from the metal tray. The tube held a specialized dark green plant extract designed to shock a failing werewolf heart. Because a flatlined heart could no longer pump blood from his extremities, Clara jammed the needle directly into the undamaged muscle near his heart, depressing the plunger with a quick, desperate push. "Come on, Alpha," Clara begged, stepping back. "Fight the poison! Wake up!" Seconds ticked past. The flatline tone droned on without a single pause. The green line did not spike. The dark green extract failed to restart his massive heart. The damage from the silver blade proved too severe. The toxic metal burned through his vital organs, leaving his werewolf healing abilities broken and useless. Clara grabbed a second vial of the green extract, but she stopped. She stared at the deep, ruined gash on his broad chest. The gray veins covering his skin turned a dark, sickly black. The healer knew the limits of their medical folklore. The poison won. Clara's shoulders slumped in total defeat. She pulled off her thick protective gauntlets, dropping the heavy gloves onto the linoleum floor. She lowered her head, staring blankly at the white tiles. Her hands shook. She lost her king. The other medics in the room read Clara's posture. They stepped away from the metal gurney. They pulled their hands away from Lennox's shoulders. One by one, the medical staff bowed their heads in a silent, respectful vigil for the fallen alpha. Finn stood near the foot of the bed. The loyal beta dropped his chin to his chest. A single tear tracked down his face, cutting a clean line through the dirt and dried blood on his cheek. The tragedy settled over the trauma room like a suffocating, heavy blanket. The towering king of the Bloodmoon Pack lay still. His chest stopped rising. The vibrant, warm hazel of his eyes remained hidden behind closed lids. The lines of stress and leadership vanished from his face, leaving behind a cold, empty shell. Harper stood in the corner of the room. Her hands lost their strength. The heavy canvas tote bag and the bundled dark shirt slipped from her grip. The items hit the floor with a dull thud. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees, hitting the hard tiles. She crawled across the floor, ignoring the medics and the beta. She reached the side of the metal gurney. She wrapped her hands around the cold metal rail of the bed. She looked at his still face. The harsh fluorescent lights above cast a cruel glare on the tragic scene. The sterile chill of the room seeped into her bones, replacing the radiant heat he used to share with her. She remembered the playful wolf tag in the mossy clearing. She remembered the deep, intuitive conversations they shared in the hidden river. He promised to protect her always. He kept his word, taking the lethal strike meant for her neck. But the price proved too high. A sharp, lasting grief tore through her soul. It felt like a physical blade slicing her chest wide open. The new, fragile mate bond stretching between their minds snapped like a frayed wire. The connection severed, leaving a dark, massive void in her head. My old pack leader stole my family legacy. But that scarred rogue took my entire world, Harper thought, her vision blurring with hot tears. Harper broke. She let out a raw, agonizing wail. The sound carried all the pain of a shattered heart. She buried her face into the bloody white sheets next to his arm. She wept over his still body, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs. The steady, calming presence he brought to her chaotic life vanished forever. She found her safe haven in his arms, and the universe ripped him away in a single night. The flatline tone continued to ring in the background, a permanent end to their short, beautiful courtship. Her world broke into jagged, unfixable pieces. Chapter 25. The unbroken tone of the heart monitor drilled a hole straight through Harper's chest. She knelt on the cold linoleum floor of the trauma room, her knees pressed against the metal wheels of the gurney. The sterile white walls seemed to close in around her, suffocating the last traces of hope. Her hands gripped the steel rail of the bed, her knuckles turning bone white from the pressure. She stared at Lennox. The towering Alpha King lay still as stone. His broad, corded chest, ruined by the jagged silver gash, held zero movement. The bright fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows over his sharp jawline. The vibrant, warm hazel of his eyes remained hidden behind pale, closed eyelids. The internal furnace of his werewolf body, a heat she felt radiating from him just hours ago in the hidden river, had vanished. His skin felt like winter ice. I built my whole life around guarding my heart, and the one time I let the walls drop, the universe snatches him away, Harper thought, her vision blurring with hot tears. Finn stood at the foot of the bed. The loyal beta stared at the linoleum, a single tear cutting through the dried blood on his cheek. He reached up and wiped his face with a trembling hand. Beside him, healer Clara stood frozen. Her heavy, protective gauntlets lay discarded on the floor tiles. The sterile metal tray beside her held the tiny, cruel shards of extracted silver, clinking with a soft sound as the room's air conditioning vent hummed to life. "Time of loss," Clara whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears. She looked at the clock mounted above the door. 11:42. The words hit Harper like a swift kick to the stomach. A fresh wave of agonizing grief tore from her throat. She buried her face into the bloody white sheets near Lennox's elbow, her shoulders shaking with violent, raw sobs. She cried for the stolen future. She cried for the quiet picnics they would never share. "Harper," Finn said, stepping around the bed. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We need to cover him. We need to prepare the pack for the transition." "Do not touch him," Harper snapped, her voice breaking. She lifted her head, her bright, observant eyes swimming with hot tears. She glared at the beta, refusing to let him pull the sheet over Lennox's face. "The plant extract needs more time. The antidote needs to work." "The poison stopped his heart, teacher," Finn replied, his tone carrying a heavy sorrow. "The silver burned too deep. The extract cannot fix dead tissue." Harper ignored the beta. She turned back to Lennox. She reached out and grabbed his large, calloused left hand. She laced her fingers through his, pressing his palm against her wet cheek. The cold temperature of his skin sent a shiver down her spine. The flatline tone continued its drone, a constant reminder of their defeat. Down on the floor, next to her knees, the bundled dark shirt rested against her heavy canvas tote bag. The thick velvet pouch holding his silver pocket watch remained safe inside the fabric. She wanted to give the watch back to him. She wanted him to wake up and hold her again. She squeezed his hand, pouring every ounce of her remaining strength into the grip. "You do not get to leave me," Harper whispered against his knuckles. "You owe me a proper date. You promised me a safe home." The room fell silent, save for Harper's quiet weeping and the unending drone of the monitor. Clara reached out to switch the machine off. Her hand hovered over the power button. Underneath Harper's cheek, a sudden twitch occurred. Harper gasped, freezing in place. She kept her eyes glued to Lennox's hand. For a long second, nothing happened. The flat-line tone continued. Then, his index finger jerked inward, curling against her palm with a weak, deliberate squeeze. Deep inside his chest, the specialized dark green plant extract hit the core of his heart muscle at last. The potent folklore medicine ignited a spark. The raw, primal strength of the Alpha King fought the lingering poison. His chest heaved. A sharp, ragged gasp tore through his throat. The continuous drone of the heart monitor broke. A single, loud beep echoed off the white tiles. The flat green line spiked upward, dropping down before spiking again. The rhythm started erratic, then settled into a slow, booming, steady drumbeat. "Clara!" Harper screamed, jumping to her feet. The head healer spun around, her eyes widening in pure shock at the jumping green line on the screen. The king's heart beat again. Chapter 26. The trauma room erupted into frantic motion. The flat green line transformed into a series of strong, steady peaks. The piercing drone vanished, replaced by the rhythmic, loud beeping of a beating heart. Clara rushed back to the metal gurney, her previous defeat erased by pure adrenaline. "He is fighting it!" she yelled, grabbing a fresh roll of sterile bandages from a cabinet. "Finn, hold his shoulders! The sudden blood flow will cause a severe shock to his nervous system." The beta threw himself across the bed, pressing his hands against Lennox's collarbones. Harper refused to let go of Lennox's left hand. She stood tight against the edge of the gurney, her knuckles white from her desperate grip. Her pulse pounded a wild rhythm against her ribs, matching the beeping of the monitor. Lennox's broad, corded chest rose and fell with deep, greedy gasps of air. The dark, sickly black veins stretching across his skin began to fade back to a dull gray. The crushed green plant poultice pressed into his jagged chest wound bubbled, drawing out the last traces of the silver poison. His werewolf physiology, freed from the toxic metal's grip, roared back to life. The internal furnace ignited. Warmth flooded back into his cold skin, radiating against Harper's palm. His thick muscles locked rigid. A low, gravelly groan rumbled deep in his throat. I will never complain about his loud voice ever again, Harper thought, hot tears streaming down her face. Lennox's eyelids fluttered. He squeezed his eyes shut tight, fighting the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights overhead. He turned his head away from the ceiling, letting out a sharp cough that rattled his recovering ribs. With slow effort, the Alpha King opened his eyes. The vibrant, warm hazel color returned, chasing away the dull glassiness of death. He blinked, his vision clearing as he registered the sterile white tiles, the frantic medical staff, and the heavy grip of his beta pinning him to the mattress. He shifted his gaze to the left. He found Harper. She stood there in her damp floral dress, her hair falling wild around her shoulders. Her soft, expressive features carried the brutal weight of the night's trauma. Bright, joyful tears spilled over her eyelashes and tracked down her cheeks. Lennox let out a long, ragged exhale. The sharp pain in his unbandaged, ruined chest felt like a raging fire. But the sight of his mate standing safe beside him acted like a soothing balm. He loosened the tight clench of his jaw. The corners of his mouth twitched, pulling upward into a weak, crooked smile. He swallowed hard, forcing his dry vocal cords to work. He looked at the tears on her face, hating that he caused them. He needed to hear her laugh. "Please tell me," Lennox rasped, his deep voice carrying a gravelly edge, "that I do not have to go back to the Timeout corner for bleeding on your rug." The room went still as ice. Finn let out a loud snort, dropping his head against the mattress in pure relief. Clara froze with a roll of bandages in her hand, staring at the king with utter disbelief. Harper let out a sound that crossed between a sob and a bright laugh. The crushing, heavy fear vanished, evaporating into the sterile air. She dropped his hand and threw her arms around his thick neck. She buried her face into the curve of his uninjured shoulder, holding him as tight as she dared. "You are the most stubborn, ridiculous man I have ever met," Harper cried, her tears soaking into his skin. Lennox wrapped his right arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. He ignored the sharp sting from his chest wound. He rested his chin against her hair, breathing in the scent of her skin. The aroma settled his inner wolf, confirming he was alive and his mate was secure. "I kept my word, teacher," Lennox whispered against her ear. "I promised to protect you." Harper pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. "Next time, try protecting yourself a little better. You ruined our picnic." Lennox chuckled. A rich sound that filled the room and proved the Alpha King survived the impossible. Chapter 27. 2 hours later, the frantic energy of the medical wing faded into a quiet, focused calm. Medics transferred Lennox from the sterile trauma room to his private quarters on the top floor of the Bloodmoon estate. The king's bedroom offered a stark contrast to the hospital setting. Thick, dark wooden furniture filled the space. A large stone fireplace dominated the far wall. The unlit log sat cold on the hearth, untouched for the season. Lennox rested against a pile of plush pillows on the wide bed. His chest bore a fresh, clean layer of white bandages. Healer Clara stood beside the mattress, packing her specialized tools back into a leather satchel. The extraction of the silver shards allowed Lennox's werewolf physiology to resume its normal function. His fast healing went to work, knitting the torn muscles together at an accelerated rate. The deep gash would heal to a thick scar by morning. "The poison is clear from your bloodstream," Clara reported, snapping her satchel shut. "You need rest. Do not shift your form for at least 3 days. The bones in your chest need time to fuse." "Understood, Clara," Lennox said, his voice regaining its familiar, steady rumble. "Thank you for the rescue." Clara offered a respectful nod and walked out, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind her. The click of the latch echoed in the quiet room. Harper sat in a winged armchair near the window. She had changed out of her damp floral dress, wearing a soft, oversized gray sweater Maya dropped off during the chaos. Her heavy canvas tote bag sat on the floor near her feet. On the bedside table, the bundled tailored dark shirt rested where she placed it. She reached over, unfolding the fabric. She pulled out the encrypted cell phone, the leather wallet, and the thick velvet pouch containing his silver pocket watch. She lined the items up neat on the nightstand. "Finn gave me the report," Lennox said, watching her organize his belongings. "Caleb sits in a reinforced iron cell in the lower levels. The rogue strike team is finished. The territory is secure." Harper stopped arranging the nightstand. She turned her bright, observant eyes toward him. The threat of the rogue alpha no longer carried any weight. Caleb failed. The Bloodmoon enforcers proved their unmatched strength. She stood from the armchair and walked over to the edge of the bed. She looked at the fresh white bandages wrapped around his broad chest. A few hours ago, she watched his heart stop beating. The terror of that moment stripped away every defense mechanism she owned. "I spent years building thick walls to keep powerful leaders out. But this king tore them down by proving he values my life over his own," Harper thought, feeling a profound shift in her soul. She did not want to hide behind her thick lesson planner anymore. She did not want to return to a lonely apartment and pretend her busy teaching schedule provided enough comfort. She wanted the brave, stubborn man sitting in the bed. Harper reached out, letting her fingers brush with a gentle touch against his uninjured shoulder. "You took a silver broadsword to the chest for me. You knew the metal would paralyze your healing, and you jumped in front of it anyway." Lennox shifted against the pillows, turning his warm hazel eyes to meet hers. "I gave you my word. I protect my mate. A sword does not change that vow." "You could have died," Harper whispered, her voice trembling. "But I did not," Lennox countered, a soft, genuine smile touching his sharp jawline. He reached up, covering her hand with his large, calloused palm. His skin felt hot, radiating his returning internal furnace. "I told you, teacher. You are my missing piece. I refuse to leave you alone in this world." Harper let out a shaky breath. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his tight grip. The lonely ache in her chest vanished, replaced by a steady, unwavering trust. She found a leader who held himself accountable to his promises. Chapter 28. The quiet calm of the private quarter settled around them like a protective shield. The heavy oak door remained shut, locking the chaotic demands of the Bloodmoon Pack in the hallway. Harper sat on the edge of the wide mattress, her hand locked tight with Lennox's large fingers. The glow from the bedside lamp cast a warm, golden light over his broad, bandaged chest and sharp jawline. Harper traced the outline of a fading silver scar on his forearm. The rough texture of the old wound told a story of 100 battles fought to keep his people safe. He was a fierce king to the outside world, but to her, He was just Lennox, the stubborn man who sat on a toddler stool in a timeout corner because he refused to leave her side. "You look tired, Alpha," Harper murmured, her voice soft and teasing. "You should follow the healer's orders and sleep." Lennox let out a low rumble of a laugh. He gave her hand a gentle pull, urging her closer. "I spent the last 4 hours fighting poison on a metal gurney. I do not want to sleep. I want my mate." Harper did not resist the pull. She shifted her weight, sliding onto the mattress beside him. She tucked her bare legs beneath the soft gray sweater. She laid down, resting her head with care against his uninjured shoulder. She avoided the fresh white bandages, ensuring she did not press against the healing chest wound. Lennox wrapped his thick, corded arm around her back. He pulled her flush against his side, his hot skin burning through the fabric of her sweater. He buried his face into her hair. He took a long, slow breath, pulling in the delicate scent of sun-warmed peaches and fresh linen. The fragrance grounded his inner wolf, acting as a permanent anchor to his humanity. "I searched my whole life for a safe place, and I found it, right here in her arms," Lennox thought, his powerful heart beating a steady, strong rhythm against his ribs. Harper tilted her chin upward. Her bright, observant eyes locked onto his warm hazel ones. The playful banter faded, replaced by a deep, electric tension. The chemistry they discovered in the hidden river flared back to life, burning hotter than before. The near-death experience stripped away all hesitation. Lennox leaned down, closing the small distance between them. He captured her lips in a deep, bruising kiss. Harper met his passion with her own. Her hands slid up his thick arms, her fingers tangling in the dark hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss spoke of raw desperation and profound relief. A physical demand to prove they both survived the nightmare in the woods. Lennox opened his mouth, tasting the sweet, frantic energy she poured into the connection. He explored her mouth with slow, deliberate care, pulling a soft moan from her throat. He rolled his broad shoulders, shifting his heavy weight to hover over her. He kept his bandaged chest elevated, supporting himself on his forearms. He stared down at her face, his eyes glowing with a bright, possessive gold light. He did not issue a command. He offered a silent, profound question. Harper reached up, tracing his jawline. She demanded strict accountability in all her dealings, and this man proved his worth with his blood. She nodded, offering her total surrender to the bond. Lennox growled, a rich sound of pure devotion. The gentle friction of his calloused hands sliding under the hem of her oversized gray sweater sent jolts of fire across her skin. He pulled the fabric over her head, tossing it onto the floorboards, leaving nothing between them. He kissed a trail down her jaw, his lips pressing hot against the pulse point on her neck. Harper gasped, arching her back into his touch. He treated her with a fierce, reverent care, proving his immense strength could be a shield rather than a weapon. They moved together in the quiet room, building a flawless rhythm. The lingering shadows of her old alpha's betrayal vanished, burned away by the genuine affection of a true king. The loneliness that haunted Lennox's rank disappeared, filled by the witty, brave Omega who anchored his soul. When the intense, passionate surrender concluded, Harper lay tangled in the thick bedsheets, resting safe against his side. The heavy burdens of their separate lives melted away. They faced the future not as an independent teacher and an exhausted king, but as a united, unbreakable pair. The Alpha found his queen at last, and Harper finally found her permanent home. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere just yet. If you thought Harper was absolutely fearless for forcing a massive alpha king to sit on a tiny timeout stool, Wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is absolutely unhinged.